Hey, it's the BoJack HorseFriends. Hello, my name is Ben, and I'm here with my friend
Ashton Brown.
That's Ashton Brown, and we're both big fans of the Netflix series called BoJack Horseman.
We are.
It's true. It's a true story.
This is a very true introduction so far. I'm very impressed.
And so we decided that because we both really enjoy it and it actually kind of resonates with us in a really kind of honest and true way, that we should just do a podcast where we talk about it and talk about each episode and some things that it makes us think about in our lives or in ourselves or whatever. Anything to add, Ashton?
Yeah, I'm hoping that this podcast perhaps gives people that love BoJack some more insight into, how we relate to it, but also people who were hesitant about watching a show about cartoon animals. I'm hoping that it makes them realize that they're missing out by not watching it.
It's really hard to explain to people why they should watch this show because it's really good, but it is animal people making dumb jokes. So
This actually immediately relates to the very first episode, which we're about to talk about anyway, so I'm going to use this very cleverly as a segue. It's that the opening scene in the very first episode is of the sitcom that the character BoJack was the lead actor in the 90s in the world of BoJack, and it's all just terrible animal puns, and that's exactly how I think people picture BoJack Horseman the show.
Yeah, I feel like Family Guy has not set up a good world for BoJack to exist in.
No, it really hasn't.
Even though it might owe some of its kind of existence to BoJack. Sorry, BoJack might owe its existence to Family Guy in some ways. I just think it's a completely different beast entirely.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Family Guy exists. When Family Guy was good, it existed very much in the world of just, making jokes. There was no serious side to Family Guy. There was no even real point that it was making. Whereas BoJack, although it might use, the cartoon element and certainly the cutaway element that Family Guy and Scrubs before it introduced and made popular, BoJack definitely doesn't exist in the same world as Family Guy in terms of style at all. So basically, if you've never seen BoJack, it's about a horse that lives in a human world where animals and humans all have human characteristics and coexist together normally. And he is basically a celebrity that was really successful in the 90s doing like a family, I guess, sitcom, and now he's a little bit more washed up in his career, and he still holds on, or he wants to hold on and relive the fame that he once had.
And he also wants to move beyond it as well.
Yeah, so absolutely.
He's kind of held back by it. He's propelled by it and held back by it at the same time.
It would be like if Jonathan Taylor Thomas was still in the spotlight today.
Or if he was rich and famous and living a very sad existence, which may be true. I don't know. I mean, I spent a lot of time when I was a kid watching really trashy family sitcoms because it was like a pre-internet world and I didn't really have a choice. I didn't have a lot of siblings around or anything like that, so it was just basically my way of keeping busy and having company. The two that really stick out to me are, of course, Full House.
Full House.
Which was simultaneously incredible and probably one of the worst shows ever made.
That was the definition of 90s sitcoms, though, wasn't it, Full House?
100%. Yeah, like Uncle Joey and Uncle Jesse and the dad, played by Bob Saget. The other one that I really remember is Step by Step. Do you ever watch Step by Step?
Oh, yeah. Is that the one that has the roller coaster intro?
Yeah. Step by Step.
Yeah. Starring Patrick Duffy.
It was so bad. And it had like the cousin who lived in a trailer on the property or something.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, I think I was probably more into Step by Step than Full House, but I definitely watched both.
So I guess like that familiarity in the opening scene, that like cold open of the first episode is so good. Then we lead into, is it the interview next?
Yes.
With a guy, and he's like, life really just is a kick in the urethra.
Yeah. So episode 1 basically starts with the Full House style show that he was in, and then cuts to an interview of him in the modern day reflecting on that show, because that's all anyone wants to talk to him about, even 15, 20 years later. There's that line that comes up particularly through episode 1 is, "Hey, aren't you the horse from Horsing Around?" And you know, I was trying to think what New Zealand's "Hey, aren't you that guy from that show?" New Zealand equivalent is, and it has to be Shortland Street. I mean, if like Chris Warner,
Yes, I was gonna. That's exactly what
no one's going to be like, "Hey, aren't you that guy from that play that I saw in 1999?"
We actually had that experience at one of your shows. Remember, one of our shows. There was a ex Shortland Street actor there. I can't remember the character he played.
Oh, Lionel.
Yeah, Lionel.
Johnny, my mate Johnny.
And somebody was like, "It's Johnny from Shortland Street."
It's
and Johnny
Lionel
was
from
just
Shortland
like,
Street.
Lionel
Yeah.
from Shortland Street.
Yeah, and he's like, "I haven't played that in 10 years. Please don't call me that." And I knew him more so as Sparky off Outrageous Fortune.
Yeah, of course.
But of course now I know him as a human being. But I still go to call him Sparky whenever I see the dude.
Well, it's that double thing, isn't it? It's like you're living in their world to them, you know, like you're their friend because you've kept them company and you've been so close to them. And if they never manage to make that kind of differentiation between, well, actually they're just doing a job, and it's not like you would go up to the pizza guy who delivers your pizza in the middle of the street and be like, "Hey, you're the guy who delivers my pizza."
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's an unusual profession.
But it's also this thing that, like, you know, everyone's shitting on horsing around in the show BoJack, and you know that did essentially make the entire dude's career. It paid for his house. It gave him everything that he that is familiar in his life now. But when you get beyond that, it's so easy to look back and be like, oh, I'm so above that now. That's so below me, you know.
Well, I think every artist has that. Like when no matter what your art form is, but if a painter paints something and then 10 years later they look at a painting that they did 10 years ago, they're going to be like, what was I thinking? Oh my gosh, you know. Take the Killers, for example. Their big song,
Somebody
Mr.
told
Brightside.
me, or
No, Mr. Brightside,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like Mr. Bright. Even their first album, Hot Fuzz, amazing. But then now you can see clearly Brandon Flowers was just like, oh, I want to move away from that poppy crap, blah blah blah.
In their case in particular as well, they peaked with Hot Fuss. So what do you do when your best thing is your first thing?
Well, the thing is, they could have tried to grow, but instead he just burnt everything to the ground and decided to start again.
I see something very similar with a band like Muse, that, you know, the first half of their career, in my opinion, is significantly better than everything they've done since, you know, The Resistance was sort of the turning point, I guess. And now I go to listen to them and I'm offended that I used to like them so much because it's such garbage now.
So bad. All right, let's move on. So BoJack fucks up the interview and he was like, am I nailing this? I'm nailing this, right? And it's like that feeling of he is so up his own ass that he talks about being drunk, driving drunk, being kicked in the urethra, and just generally shows his awful self and is still like, hey, I think I'm doing pretty well, which I think is it really sets up his character, because I don't think he actually, when he reflects on it, he's the kind of person who will be like, oh God, what did I do? And then he'll get bad feedback about it, but he'll still remain like, no. So yeah, we've set up the content, we've set up the character, and beautifully within the first few minutes. And then we get the intro, which is one of the greatest intros in the history of television.
Absolutely, from the music to the way that we sort of follow BoJack with that camera directly on his face, you know, so the camera's static essentially and the background's moving around him as he moves through this party landscape.
And it's, again, starts to give you some insight into what you want to expect with the series, because you've got this picture of this close-up on BoJack and he's getting slowly more drunk and sad, and in the background there's just all this goofy, crazy, weird stuff happening, which sets up the tone of the show. You're going to have a lot of goofy, funny, dumb shit happening, but you're also going to be watching the breaking down of this man.
And so much of, you know, BoJack, even from the opening scene, is setting up a premise that sort of is constant through all, is it 5 seasons? Through all 5 seasons, is that, you know, this idea of the humanity or the human face behind the celebrity, not just the thing we see on the screen, but the mental health and the issues that go along behind the scenes of what it is to be a celebrity and a successful person, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about a little bit more of that in a second, but we learn very quickly that BoJack is supposed to be writing a memoir, and he goes and talks to the head of Penguin Publishing, and I love the irony that the head of Penguin Publishing is a turtle. I enjoy that very much. No, wait, is he...
No, he's a penguin.
No, he is a penguin.
That's not Turtletub. Turtletub's
Okay.
the producer.
So he goes to see the penguin, who is the... Okay, start again. He goes to see the head of Penguin Publishing, who is in fact a turtle, which is the kind
a penguin.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
It's all in the name,
Bloops! Bloops! He goes to see the lead publisher of Penguin, who is in fact a penguin, which is sets the tone for what we can expect to be consistently laid out, but also subverted throughout the series, which is fun. We learn that BoJack's already spent his advance, which I don't believe, because I'm pretty sure the dude is so wealthy he could easily pay it back.
Yeah.
So he clearly just really wants to get his memoir done, but he's really struggling with it, which I feel deep in my core, because I'm currently supposed to be doing my thesis, and...
I mean, the anxiety as a creative person or as a writer around doing the thing you want to do and fulfills you most, and still leaning towards the not doing it side of things.
Oh,
I mean, a good example of this is, Ben, how many weeks has it taken me to commit to doing this podcast? I mean, I wanted to do it from the moment you brought it up, but my anxiety about doing it suddenly becomes, the thing that's getting in between me and actually doing it. And that's just a fun podcast, not like a thesis that you were talking about, or BoJack's memoir. So it's a very real, relatable thing. The main, as RuPaul would say, your inner saboteur. Even though it's the one thing you get most fulfillment from, it's also the thing you put off doing the most. And coming back to the penguin from Penguin Publishing, I noticed as well, this is voiced by the amazing Patton Oswalt.
Dude, he's so good.
Oh, he's so good. And it's his second... I mean, we're only 5 minutes into the episode, and it's the second character that he's voiced within that time, because he's also voicing the interviewer at the very beginning.
Patton Oswalt's ability to create character with his voice is so almost, to me, at odds with the person that he presents in the world. I don't know if that makes sense, but he's this larger-than-life character. He has a very distinctive voice to begin with, and he's obviously an intelligent guy, but his ability to create those two disparate, so distinct characters, the very serious interviewer, and then they're like, oh gosh, what's going on? Penguin guy, it's so good.
And what's even more impressive is that he actually has an extremely recognizable voice. I mean, you can't imagine Gilbert Gottfried doing a variety of characters.
No, you do one very well, but you're exactly right.
I mean, once Iago, always Iago.
And I love that character, the penguin. The penguin is so clever with the jokes that they're making, because it was very timely about... Obviously, books have kind of had a renaissance since then, but it really was like that for the book industry for a while. I finished my degree in English and drama when it was 2010. And at the time, I was like, you know what? I really want to go into publishing. I'd love to be an editor one day. So whatever I could do in that industry would be awesome. And so I began emailing, and I tried to call people, left voicemails, and I just heard nothing back. Even I had like a connection through my mum who knew somebody who worked in publishing, and I was like, hi there, I've heard you work in publishing. I'd love to know a bit more about it, like how I could get involved. And they were like, I guess it depends on what you want to do. I'm in this part of publishing, so it's not easy at the moment or something. And I was just like, I guess I could be a teacher. So, so I did that for 4 years.
And how fulfilling is it being a teacher when you don't want to be one, Ben?
Oh, it's honestly... I don't want to get into that. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that is another podcast that no one wants to listen to.
So we learn BoJack's fucking up, and the penguin guy's like, you should get a ghostwriter, and he's like, I'm not going to get a ghostwriter. Oh, I'm not going to get a ghostwriter. And then we go back and we see BoJack back at his house, and we meet the inimitable Todd,
Yes.
who is a completely different character to the Todd that we meet even a season later, even at the
Oh my
end of the season.
And he's even Aaron Paul, who voices Todd, who you probably most know of Breaking Bad, playing science bitch Jesse. He's still finding his Todd voice, and it's so different than it is even a season later, but so is the character. When we first meet Todd, he's sort of this cliche stoner type. And he develops into this character that is, that he becomes such a fully realized character.
There is something about Todd that I do feel like the writers probably saw his change as it came, rather than as having it as planned out as I think probably BoJack's was. And I think that's reflected in Aaron Paul's voice acting as well, where BoJack was so fully realized. And to be fair, I don't think Will Arnett stretches too far.
No, I don't think he does
voice.
either. I don't think he does. He nails it from the moment he speaks.
100%.
And his connection to the character is it's got no need to develop because it's perfect from the moment he talks. But you're right, it is very much Will Arnett voicing a cartoon horse is Will Arnett voicing a cartoon horse.
Yeah, but I think Todd's voice is a little bit more. There's some more artistry in it, I feel, because of it's not necessarily that he changes his voice for Todd, but it's that he changes his cadence and rhythms and pacing and in such subtle ways that it creates something entirely new, which is really cool.
He's such a fantastic character to take the role of BoJack's best friend in the way he compliments BoJack in terms of, BoJack is almost the worst in what we see in ourselves, and Todd is, perhaps the best in many ways. But both of them come with their... maybe not the best is the wrong term, but then this full spectrum to their personalities still.
Well, I think we'll come back to Todd in a minute because I want to talk about somebody else as well. But before we get there, I do want to talk about BoJack watching his own show. Again, he's sitting there and he's watching Horsing Around, and Todd comes in. He's like, "Are you drunk?" He's like, "I'm a 1,200-pound horse. It takes a lot of beer to get me drunk." And it pans out to all the beer bottles. He's like, "Yes." But him kind of making Todd watch Horsing Around reminds me of the first time that we hung out.
Is this? Are you bringing up?
No, I don't want to mention
now?
the name. I'm going to bleep the name out. But
Why?
I don't know why. But I just received the DVD version of a show that I had been in, a movie, a full feature-length.
Oh, it's so long.
Musical that I had been in, and I just knew that you'd be the perfect person to watch it with, even though we had only hung out twice before. Fuck, it was so funny listening to you just consistently tear me and everyone else apart. It really reminded me of that moment, but except that BoJack, I think, was unironically enjoying his own show.
Yeah. And seconds later, there's a cutaway and he's having sex and he's actually got Horsing Around on in the background. He's looking past the woman that's straddling him to watch his own show, and then he climaxes at the terrible punchline of the episode of Horsing Around, which is a beautifully unsubtle metaphor to the arrogance of
Totally.
certain level of celebrity, that he's not enjoying the sex until he can make eye contact with his character on the screen.
So then we go to the restaurant that becomes a mainstay of the show in its entirety, and he gets broken up with by Princess Caroline.
PC, I love that woman.
She's amazing. She's
such
probably
a
one
good
of my
character.
favorite characters. Yeah. So her and BoJack have obviously been together, and she's just kind of over it. And there's a great gag about her being like, I never said I didn't want kids. And she was like, it's not about what you say. And then you see him kind of roll a crib into the middle of the street when he sees a child and runs away.
And then as he runs off with the baby's pram, someone yells, "Aren't you the horse from Horsing Around?"
That's right. Oh, that's good comedy.
It's like when people have seen my naked insurance ad and they think they're the first person to say it's weird to see you with your clothes on.
Yeah. I mean, it is weird to see you with your clothes on. But
but that was
for other reasons.
Yeah, I was about to say, Ben, you thought that before the ad. But it is one of those things, again, that people comment on because it's the excitement of seeing someone off the tally in real life, and that's all you exist as. And I'm talking about being in one ad, not an actual level of success, so I can't imagine what it's like to be an actual celebrity. And
Totally. I'm going to completely change tack here because I want to keep going through the show. But PC and BoJack break up. Princess Caroline, who is his girlfriend / agent, which is a great idea, obviously. His relationship with women in general throughout the entire season is actually really painful to watch.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with very strong women in my life. Like it's a big source of anxiety for me is that I would ever be, a toxic, misogynistic man. I really, really never want to see that in myself. So seeing someone like BoJack, who I in some ways relate to and in other ways really, really don't, like, he's famous, so I definitely don't relate to that part. But seeing him treat women so badly, so consistently throughout the series is really hard to watch, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think so too, and it's a credit to the writing as well that BoJack is this character who does these awful things and treats women in these such abhorrent ways, yet he's still the lead character and they still make us root for him throughout it.
But it's those moments of him trying to do better.
Yeah.
That is what you're rooting for.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
This has just kind of come to me, but I watched the show You on Netflix. Have you seen it?
Yes, I watched both seasons of You.
So the protagonist in You is
horrific.
Awful. Like, he's just awful. And having insight into his mind and his working the way it works has given him this huge fan base, and the fact that he's, kind of an attractive dude, it's given him this huge fan base. And again, you can see it in Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov as well, to go a little bit more wanky on You, where there's this terrible person doing terrible things, but when you read it, you can't help but empathize or sympathize with that person, rather. And I think what BoJack does very well is that they never set up BoJack to be somebody who you want to emulate.
No,
they never set up BoJack
no.
to be somebody who you sympathize with him and you empathize with him, but you never think, oh, it's okay that he's that way.
No, not at all. And you always want him to be better because you want to like him, but you can't quite.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to that. It's one of my favourite quotes. I say it any chance I get. In terms of, you mentioned Lolita and You, and of course BoJack, is that no one is a villain in their own storyline.
Yeah.
But the thing is, BoJack kind of is.
Yeah, and I think what does that and what makes it work so well is that BoJack's justifications for what he does are always terrible. He never has a good justification for his behavior. It's always portrayed to us as a bad justification.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I think in You especially, everything he does is justified so well to himself that we're taken along for the ride.
Absolutely. And people find themselves rooting for that character in You, even though when you step back, or even you don't even have to step back, it's right in front of you. He's horrendous.
Yeah, he's a really bad man.
yeah, and there's nothing there's nothing redeeming about him.
No.
In fact, everything he does is so self-serving that there is actually no but he's also this. Yet we still root for him, and that's the danger, I guess, of a show like You.
Yeah.
Is that we are rooting for him against our better judgment.
And he is misogynist, but
He's
his misogyny
horrific.
is hidden within this fake caring.
Yeah.
Like this thing of, I just want to take care of this person. I just want to make them feel good and look after them.
His caring is pseudo, forced. It's just misogyny with a different coat on.
Yeah, it's just misogyny with extra steps.
Yeah.
So we then Todd throws a party at BoJack's house because he got in trouble with a Mexican gang and needed a place.
Todd's always in trouble with his side storyline. No matter what's happening in the central focus, Todd's side storyline is ridiculous.
Yeah. And so he needs a place to throw a quinceañera for a Mexican gang boss's daughter. Excuse my pronunciation of quinceañera.
Forgiven.
Thank you. So he kind of convinces BoJack through sheer force of will to throw that in his house, and we enter the party. And we meet probably one of the greatest. No, I'm going to say the greatest character in the show, which is...
Yeah, he's my... I also, when watching it, commented how much I love this character.
Mr. Peanut Butter. It took a while for Mr. Peanut Butter to grow on me. Mr. Peanut Butter is a golden Labrador / human, and he is indomitably... He is unwaveringly optimistic and positive, and just like the opposite to BoJack in so many ways. And there's a line which is BoJack says he's so stupid he doesn't realize how miserable he should be.
Yeah.
Which I think says a lot more about BoJack than it does about Mr. Peanut Butter.
And all the stuff that Mr. Peanut Butter can do so effortlessly drives BoJack so insane, because like you see Mr. Peanut Butter walking around the party and he's friends with absolutely everyone. His ability to schmooze so genuinely makes BoJack go insane, because the thought of BoJack even having a conversation with someone who he might be able to, that he probably needs to befriend for the sake of a career advance or something. BoJack hates the idea of that, whereas someone like Peanut Butter can do it so genuinely that it's not schmoozing, it's just being likable.
Yeah, it's just being himself.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we did actually skip ahead with the party because there was the anxiety attack.
Yes, there is the anxiety attack.
Okay, let's quickly go back. BoJack talks about PC calls BoJack and is like, he's like, I thought you weren't talking to me. And she goes, oh, that was me as your girlfriend. I'm your agent now.
That's right. Which one of the reasons I stopped dating actresses is because when you break up and you're still pretending to run an awful theatre company together, it's the whole dating someone that you work with is not a great idea in my opinion.
Yeah, it worked for me, but we don't work together anymore. So.
Yeah, true. And you're not both, creatives in the same field.
Yeah, exactly. We work in very different... Yeah.
It can be two actors dating, in my opinion. Some people make it work, and I just don't. That's why me and Ben have never dated.
So he talks about his dream role being the great racing horse secretariat, who is fictional, I think, but he is this kind of larger-than-life character who was just effortlessly charming, but also really struggled with mental health. And that's who BoJack sees as the epitome of a role to play. For me, my dream role has always been Riff Raff in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
Because
I've still never seen Rocky Horror.
You've not seen Rocky Horror? No. Oh, dude, you've got to come watch it with us. We'll set up a Rocky Horror viewing party. We can get dressed in drag and stuff if you want.
I'm in.
Sweet. Riff Raff is everything I love in a role, because it's kind of an ugly role. It's kind of over the top, but and the singing is intentionally kind of off, and it's just so much fun.
I find it really interesting that both our sort of dream roles, even though neither of us are musical theatre performers really by any stretch of the imagination, because my dream role is Judas from Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
And that's so odd to me that both our sort of dream roles are from musicals when we spend little to no time working on anything to do with that craft.
That's a good point. I think the thing about musicals is that they're so broad and varied. But if you look at the two musicals that we're talking about, Rocky Horror is probably the furthest thing from a straight musical you can get.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Jesus Christ Superstar is kind of a rock opera more than a musical.
Yeah.
But the two characters as well are kind of these dirty, kind of like grimy, which it does explain our attraction to BoJack Horseman, the show as well.
Yeah.
And the character. So they have that conversation about wanting to play Secretariat, and Princess Caroline is like, oh, maybe if you actually did some work, people might remember you.
Yeah.
And then he has an anxiety attack.
Yeah, which, this is all episode 1.
Yeah. It's talked for like 40 minutes since episode 1.
And there's, but also in terms of the things that they're covering in episode 1. When I was watching it, I was like, I don't remember him having like a full anxiety episode so early on in the show.
I didn't remember him being hospitalized.
No, I know.
In the first episode.
He literally thinks he's dying, which if you've ever had an anxiety or panic attack, no matter how many times you've had them, it's always the one that's going to kill you. And the way they do it, it's not ever making fun of that.
No, not at all. Like, you get the sense that he is serious about it. His anxiety attack is serious, but what triggers it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much. And he has what the doctor calls a mild anxiety attack. And he says, well, if that's mild, I don't know what spicy feels like, which is amazing joke.
It's such a good line. And then no one laughs, and he's like, that was a salsa joke for those of
which is obviously, anxiety is something that we have in common. We're both medicated for anxiety, and so it was super relatable. And then BoJack gets a phone call and immediately has another anxiety attack.
Yeah, which again I can 100% relate to. Someone calls you on the phone and that will immediately trigger my anxiety. And I can't remember how this fits into chronologically in this episode, but there's a bit where BoJack is really struggling with the idea of being quite overweight, and although it's quite comical itself in the episode, it was such a poignant thing for me to again relate to. Someone who has ongoingly for all of my adult life struggled with being overweight, and I like the fact that usually when male characters are fat, that's the whole point of their character, is that they're fat. They're not a character who happens to be fat or happens to struggle with their weight. They're a fat character. And I really like in BoJack that that's not the defining feature of him, because I like to think that being overweight isn't my defining feature, believe it or not. And I don't really know where this ramble's going, but I really liked it. He was a dude that happened to be overweight or struggle with his weight, his perception of himself, but it wasn't we don't think BoJack that fat, funny character at all. And I think that's what makes BoJack so interesting, is that he is this multi-layered, human horse man.
Exactly, and he has a really unhealthy relationship with food, which I know many people can relate to.
Absolutely.
And that develops as well again, and it carries through the entire season, which is really brilliant.
It's I'm just going to quickly mention this without going into it too much. It's really good to see these issues dealt with even immediately in episode 1 without them being patronizing or preachy in any way. Because so often it's like, this show's about struggling with mental health. Let us talk down to you through the characters for the next 28 minutes. And BoJack is not that.
No, it's not like, what was it, 13 Reasons or something,
13 Reasons Why, which then up to season 48, I think, now.
Oh, I think that sounds about right. I think that alternated between those and Rocky movies.
Yeah, The Expendables is actually doing a crossover episode with 13 Reasons Why.
I would 100% watch that.
13 Expendables Why.
13 Reasons You're Expendable.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So we get to the party. As well as Mr. Peanut Butter, we also meet Diane, who might be my favorite character, voiced by Alison Brie, a fantastic actor, a fantastic voice actor, and again, she's not reaching too far for her Diane voice, but just nails it.
No, not at all.
Completely.
But it's perfectly placed with, it's so real the way she does it. I think Diane is such an amazing character.
There's a moment where the Mexican gang boss says to Todd that after the party goes off without a hitch, and he says, "You have made a powerful ally for life." And I really wish that had paid off at some point later in the series, but it doesn't. So Diane has this kind of out loud internal monologue where there's no kind of filter between what she's feeling and what she's saying.
Yeah. And that what she says about parties, it got me thinking. I was like, is there anyone that isn't anxious at parties?
Yeah.
I thought it was just the thing that we all do because we feel like we have to, but secretly we all hate them. Or are there people that genuinely don't get anxious about the thought of being in a room with people?
I have enjoyed parties before. Like, I've had parties where I've enjoyed them, but for the most part, I don't remember enjoying them.
Yeah.
Because, alcohol abuse is a thing. So
yeah.
we meet Diane, and they start to talk about how he's struggling to write his, what do you call it, his memoir, and she says, well, actually, I can help you with that. Turns out she's the ghostwriter that the Penguin wanted to set BoJack up with, and they end up having an agreement that she's going to help him write the memoir.
And he immediately falls head over heels for Diane in that moment, in that first conversation.
He falls head over heels for the idea of Diane, for the
absolutely.
concept
He knows
of
nothing
a woman who might be as damaged as he is.
Absolutely. She talks to BoJack immediately in a way where it's just they connect on such a cool level.
And then finds out straight away that she is, of course, Mr. Peanut Butter's girlfriend.
Yes, and there's a beautiful exchange where he's like, "You're attracted to this.
Your penis has been inside of that vagina." So stupid. I actually, I wrote here that Mr. Peanut Butter actually does remind me of you in a lot of ways because he just
me.
Yeah, because there are times when he just says ridiculously things that are like borderline offensive, but he's so earnest and charming that people are just like, oh, ha 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 ha. The same thing could come from my mouth and people would be like, what the fuck is wrong with that guy?
I've never thought about that aspect of me and Mr. Peanut Butter because, of course, I always am like, oh, I'm so much like parts of BoJack. But you're right, I have always had this ability to make a joke that if someone else made, they would be like, what the fuck is wrong with that Ben guy?
Yeah, especially me because I have a bit of a deadpan approach to things. That's
a really nice way to put that.
Ben. I have resting sarcastic voice, and so there was something about Mr. Peanut Butter in this watch through that when I was thinking about you as I was making notes for this, I was like, you know what? Actually, there's something of him in there.
I've never personally connected with Mr. Peanut Butter because I think the reason why again the writing is so good is because we all have a Mr. Peanut Butter in our life that we sort of look at from BoJack's eyes.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, and this is what I wanted to come back to this when in terms of the three kind of main male characters in this movie, and it's BoJack in this show. Sorry, there's BoJack, it's Mr. Peanut Butter, and it's Todd.
Yeah,
and obviously BoJack is the lead character, but when you start to look at Mr. Peanut Butter and you start to look at Todd, what you start to realize is that the show is really told from BoJack's perspective. In fact, BoJack is almost an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
And you start to question, as the show progresses throughout its seasons, and you start to learn more about these people, you start to feel like it's not just you learning more about these people, but it's actually BoJack learning more about these people.
Yeah,
Everything
absolutely.
is through his lens. And then we come back to that line where Mr. Peanut Butter is so stupid he doesn't realize how miserable he should be.
Yeah.
And like when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, 16, 17, I remember having those thoughts where at some point I said out loud, I wish I could just be stupid and be happy working like a menial job, which is just the fucking cuttiest thing to say. And like, it's an awful thing to say. How do I know if those people are happy? How do I know if those people are smart? Like, and I'm actually dumb as fuck. Like, a lot of the time, I do some stupid ass stuff. Like, I have my strengths and I have my weaknesses, and I think everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And as Mr. Peanut Butter's life progresses, we see his strengths and weaknesses, and as Todd's life progresses, we see his strengths and weaknesses.
Mr. Peanut Butter becomes much less of an idealistic character as BoJack gets to understand him and his struggles more.
Yeah, it was a really poignant moment, I think, for me, because it was recognizable, that line in particular. I've come a long way from there. Unfortunately, it didn't take me becoming, like a miserable 50-year-old in Hollywood to get there. So,
do you know, it just struck me, one of the main things I love about the show is that we're talking in depth about a character called Mr. Peanut Butter. And we're talking about it as though it's like this real world figure, and it's like
who's a Labrador
voiced by the amazing Paul F. Tompkins.
Yeah, of course, we haven't mentioned Paul F. Tompkins yet.
And I also noticed we didn't mention with PC Amy Sedaris?
Amy Sedaris, yeah.
And these are all amazing improv artists from America.
Voice acting has become more, I don't want to say mainstream, but like more acceptable in the adult world, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, just like animated shows have.
Yeah.
Voice acting is like, I've always said, the one thing I hate about acting is that people, if you're successful at it, people know who you are. And that's my if I could pick one career goal, it would be to make a living off voice acting. Because, to not have my face and stuff, but to still be acting is the dream for me. For someone with anxiety, that's like the performance dream.
I also just enjoy doing dumb voices constantly.
Oh, so
it drives Eden insane, my girlfriend Eden insane, and I'll never stop. When we get to that concept of Mr. Peanut Butter versus Todd versus BoJack, we start to see these three distinct kind of things happening where BoJack has opportunities and continually messes them up. Mr. Peanut Butter has opportunities and continually dives into them headfirst and will find his own opportunities when nothing comes up. And then Todd just lives like a pinball, like just existing from moment to moment and seeing whatever happens. And so those three approaches to life become this really interesting triad to watch as these three men try and go about existing in different ways. Yeah, so the last thing that I really wanted to talk about was Mr. Peanut Butter again, because I could just talk about him forever. He is, in this episode anyway, he's a representative of BoJack trying to find something else to blame for his own misery.
Yeah.
Mr. Peanut Butter was also in a very famous TV show in the 90s. Was it called Dog's House or something?
No, Mr. Peanut Butter's House.
Mr. Peanut Butter's House, which is about
which
a
is
dog.
a direct rip-off of what BoJack was in.
Which is about a dog who gets three orphans and has to look after them. Or is it twins or something? I don't know. And so he's this perfect mirror of BoJack, and BoJack's kind of the evil side. And when I was younger, again, like it was very common of me to try and find somebody to blame for my misery.
Yeah.
Like I was upset and I was an anxious person. I had depressive episodes and I overthought everything, and it was really hard for me to ever accept that I was the one at fault. To exemplify this, there was a time where I went to a person's birthday party and I got really, really drunk, like upsettingly drunk. Like we went out to this person's house and they had like a tree house, and I jumped in the tree house and was like, I'm a pirate, yar, like yelling at everybody. Like the whole family's on the lawn staring at me. And then we were like, okay, let's leave. They ordered a cab. They were like, let's go to town. I was like, yeah, let's go to town. And so they like ordered a cab, and I was like, ugh. And then the cab arrived and there was only enough seats for them. And I was like, wait, what? Who's going to stay behind? And they were like, yeah, you should go home. And they all got in the cab and just left me there. Excuse me, knocking my mic. They just left me there. And I had to like order another cab and pay for it by myself to go home. And they were like, you were being a dick. And I was like, really upset and betrayed. And I was like, my friends betrayed me, And it was just one of those moments that I look back on now, and it's like, of course they did. You're being a total asshole.
Yeah. But there's also that aspect that I get out of the relationship between BoJack and Peanut Butter and stuff, is that as performers, we're always measuring our success based on those who are doing better than us. We very rarely compare our success to people who aren't doing as well as us. So the line of what we want to achieve is always being pushed slightly further away. So if we're not careful, we never really reach that point of being content. Well, I certainly was like that in my early 20s. I feel like I'm much more realistic now, and my ability to be happy isn't compared to other people's. But I find that with BoJack is he's constantly moving. It's that whole thing from Extras where Andy Millman will never be famous enough, or when he's successful, it's not the right kind of successful, or he's not recognized by the right kind of people. And that all adds to an industry that is filled with some pretty miserable people.
Yeah, I guess if you're the kind of person to go seeking constant validation through your actions.
Yeah.
That's essentially what acting is.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. So, that pretty much takes us to the end of the episode. And they have the party, and BoJack throws up a bunch of candy floss, which really brings something new to the throwing up all over people gag. And that's pretty much it. So
And then the final shot is like a zoomed out shot of how much candy floss he's actually vomited off the side of his deck to remind you, after all that you are watching a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So an incredible first episode, because first episodes are often really hard. And although there's some bits and pieces that obviously change over time, like Todd and things like that, I think overall probably a solid episode of TV. So that's what we think of it, and that's how it speaks to us.
Yeah. So have a watch yourself and let us know what you think.
Yeah, do let us know what you think. I guess we'll set up some kind of
Communication,
social media thing,
a Facebook page,
or a Reddit,
MySpace.
You can find us. We're BoJack HorseFriends. That's BoJack HorseFriends, one word, and find us somewhere. We haven't figured it out yet. If you can't find us, wait till the next episode, and maybe we'll have some more solid things. Yeah. So I've been Ben Moore.
And
Ben Moore.
I continue to be Ashton Brown.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.